לא נשכח תמיד להיות מאוחדים עם ישראל חי בעליות בירידות גם בשעות הכי קשות.
Shalom everybody and welcome to the Yishai Fleisher Show, broadcasting live from Judea. You're a part of it wherever you are, Be'ezrat Hashem. Welcome to Malka Fleisher.
Hello, hello.
Great to have you on the show, Malka.
Yes, good to be back.
My voice is a little funky, and we are recording late. That's because I was on an overnight hike. It's very hot here in the summer, and this summer is hotter than the usual summer.
So hot, like record heats.
It's a scorcher. Makes me think maybe there's something to this global
maybe
warming
we shouldn't
thing.
have used all those plastic bags.
No, or maybe it's just it's just something that happens cyclically. That there's ups and downs in terms of temperatures, and I don't know what the answer is, and that's not the topic of my show. For that, go to other folks who discuss climate change or not. But you can feel free to write to me about it. The point is, it's hot. That's going to tell you for sure. It's a hot summer.
Yeah, if
here
you
in
know
Israel.
something about this, if you have some insider info, you can always let us know.
Yeah.
And we'd be interested in that.
You know what? If you just have a direct line to Hashem and just ask him to, just it's a little warm. I'm sure he knows what he's doing.
5 degrees Fahrenheit cooler.
Maybe,
or 10.
Or maybe this is good. Maybe it keeps the bad guys down. I don't know. The bottom line is that there's intensity right now in the heat, and I have a friend who his name is Ori. He does a lot of work bringing into Israel stuff that the security forces need for this war. But when he comes into Israel from time to time, he helps organize a hike, and it's so fun. We did an overnight hike over the En Gedi Mountains and then down into the pass, a very steep pass, into the reserve, the nature reserve called Nachal David. I went to this beautiful pool, but it was an all-night hike. We slept for about an hour and a half. Then we hiked down in the super heat, even though it was early morning. We were talking about 7:30, but it was already like boiling hot. And by the time we get down there, we were drenched with sweat. Finally made it to these cool spring waters, like wowzers! Like what a waterfall!
Thank
like
God.
one of the, I don't know.
Still in the middle of summertime. It's amazing.
Cold, crisp water. The whole thing is like a mossy, beautiful. It was just like wow.
That must have felt awesome.
It felt amazing.
Yishai, I was 30 minutes from calling Sheshesh Tesha, which is Israel's military search and rescue operation.
You know what their number is on the phone?
No, I don't think it's Sheshesh Tesha. That would be cool.
No, that would be nice.
That actually makes sense, but therefore that is not the number.
No, yeah, I tried to. I was sending you signals throughout, but then at that point,
there
in
was
the canyons,
there was no reception at all.
There's no reception,
and I thought you were supposed to be done at 8 a.m. At 10 a.m. when I hadn't heard from you and you had my children with you, then I was just like, I'm giving him 30 minutes. Yeah. If I don't hear from this guy in 30 minutes, then I'm calling search and rescue, because it gets up in the Dead Sea region. It gets to these days, it gets to 120 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
That ain't no joke. You can't be hanging out in that.
Speaking of 120 degrees, there was a couple this week that was murdered, killed.
Unbelievable.
When a Hezbollah rocket hit them directly. And yeah, so these people down up in the Golan Heights were hit by a rocket. And the car was hit directly by a rocket. And they were killed. And then afterwards, everybody's talking about what led to the fact that they were hit. Was it that the early warning didn't go off? Was it that the GPS, they got messed up and they drove in a place that's dangerous? And everybody's answers are the wrong answer.
Right.
It's all the wrong answer. Mm-hmm. It's not because of this failure. It's like victim blaming, right?
Right.
The answer is
seeing the forest for the trees.
Right. The answer is, the real fault here is that we let the bad guys be on our borders to shoot rockets at us.
Yeah, someone's shooting rockets at us. That's why they died. Not because this little thing failed and this little thing. Although, Yishai, I have to say, things that fail is a part of this week's show, I'm sorry to say. There was a big report that came out of the failures, basically. They did an analysis of what happened in Kibbutz Be'eri, which is the kibbutz on the Gaza border that suffered the worst losses. And the failures, Yishai, are I can't list them all. There were so many failures that happened in Kibbutz Be'eri. I mean, the first failure is the most obvious one, which is the intelligence community knew for months and people were screaming to high heavens. All kinds of people, professional people, amateur people, all kinds of people were screaming that something is happening on the border. You have to do something, and no one did a
Right.
blessed thing. So that is like fail. That is the most important failure.
No.
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 Okay.
No. That is down the line. The most important failure was already in 2005.
Okay. Fair enough.
When we gave away the land, and then we warned them that would happen.
Right.
That's
right.
when you give away your and here's a logic that every person on the airplane that I meet knows, which is don't give your land away to your enemies. That's dumb. Don't do that. Just don't do that. Okay? Then don't let them build up a military infrastructure underneath your nose. So that's 2.
Right.
That's a 20-year project.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you see them mounting an operation, then act on that. So that's like 3. See, that's what you said was third down the line, right? Then,
Correct.
if they mount a military operation and you missed it, you better come in with choppers and mow them down, right? And get rid of the bad guys, and then 5 is if they got into your kibbutzim and they killed your people and you weren't able to mow them down, then you make a war.
The likes of which this
Right.
region has never seen.
Right. Then and you say you have messed with the wrong country. And you turn off the electricity and you turn off the water and you turn off everything.
Right. And you bomb the Egyptian border
Right.
and they all flow out of there.
Right. So you don't
Right.
these analyses, this analysis is failure number 6. The analysis itself is a failure. The analysis itself doesn't understand that the way they're analyzing it is in itself a failure. They cannot see the big picture. The big picture is not like, oh crap, the camera didn't exactly, and
Focus
therefore
correctly,
therefore
right.
we didn't have the backup units over here. That's like down the line already. You're missing the big picture. You're missing the jihadism that is being formed. You're missing what Iran is doing. You're missing the tightening of the noose around our neck through the proxy war that this octopus is sending out. That you're missing what's happening on campus. You're looking again. You're like, your very analysis is itself a proof of how you don't understand what the real situation around here is. And so to me, it's just like failure upon failure upon failure. They can't see the big picture. They just can't see it. I know these guys. I'm telling you, I know these generals. I know these types. I know them. You talk to them and you're like, I hear this all the time. And this leads to a similar failure, which is the other failure that we were going to talk about on the show. By the way, that couple that was killed,
Yeah.
Their names are Noah and Nir Baranis. Noah and Nir Baranis. And there's a picture of them here on
They're
the
the cutest
Jerusalem
people
Post.
in the world.
They're cute, smiley people.
And now their kids are orphans. Incidentally, I heard
They were both 40. They were 46 years old. They left behind 3 children. By the way, you know what's a number I'd like to know?
Okay.
I would like to know how many orphans are there.
Yeah.
I'd like to know how many orphans are there from this.
Chabad probably knows that.
I want to know
We
how
should
many
contact
orphans
Chabad.
there are
Chabad probably knows
from the
that.
beginning of this war.
It's horrific. Actually, when these people were killed in their car, that is the first time that I had like a real rage break for like 60 seconds. For like 60 seconds, I was so livid, enraged. I was in the house. I found out about it here by myself. I'm yelling in the house. I was so upset. Frankly, I was upset with Hashem. But I got over it. And then and I was just upset. I was full of rage. You know, I don't think people who live outside of Israel understand necessarily the emotions, the ongoing daily up and down emotions that Israelis have been dealing with for the last 9 months. And it's not that we need pity or anything. It's just that I think that we really have been living a different reality
Absolutely.
than a lot of other people, and it's something that you try to like cope with and raise your families alongside. And
I'll
it's
give
not
you an
easy.
example.
It's not easy.
You and I, we're flying to America soon, and I wanted to let people know that I will be in the Dallas area
Right.
for a few days. I will be in
New York, New
the
Jersey.
upstate New York area, and then in the New Jersey area, in New York, New Jersey area. We're going to be on the road for like 2 weeks. And there's just a few little spots left to do a gig. Most of it is taken up, but if you want me to come to your community and there's something special. So please reach out to me. Maybe we could fit you in. But we're going to be in the U.S. for a kind of family trip before my son's bar mitzvah. But this trip is going to be, B'ezrat Hashem, it's going to be fun.
Right. I hope so.
But like at the same time, it's like hard. It's like there's a war happening.
Right. It's hard.
And we're going to be out there, in Texas swimming in a pool. And it's just like...
Yeah, but then on top of that, you also hear that in America, there's such a range of opinions about Israel and Israelis.
Yeah.
I'm like, I walk around, I cover my hair and I walk around in a scarf. So I don't have a wig. I never wear a wig. Some people, that's how they like operate in society. They wear a wig. You can't really identify them, but I'm pretty identifiable. I'm curious to see how it will be.
The places that you're going to visit, you're not going to feel a thing.
You think?
I know.
I don't know. We'll see.
You won't feel a thing. In fact, the opposite. You'll feel a lot of support.
I'm saying that, but in some places, I feel like I might get extra support more than an average person.
I'll tell you one place.
Places I might get looks.
I'll tell you we're going to get looks. If you go visit the White House, which should be at this time dubbed the Black House, because what's happening right now is so sick, which is yet another round of, during a war, yet another round from our other enemy in the White House, the Biden administration. They're now sanctioning more Jews living in Judea and Samaria. And I want to say something about this. Yeah. I put the blame again squarely on the Israeli leadership. I put it squarely on them. They're not the ones who are doing this evil act, but they should have gone absolutely insane to stop this. This kind of economic terror that the Biden administration is putting on us. And the way to have done that is simple: to be like, we now make it illegal for Israeli companies to sanction these citizens. It is not legal in this country to uphold that thing. And if a bank needs to cut off credit or else their whole system is cut off, fine. Immediately set up an alternative system, an internal banking system that's cut off. Make a bank immediately. It'll take 5 minutes. It's all computer stuff. Make a bank that only has internal lines of credit in Israel, and a new bank that government issued that has zero international credit stuff. Make a bank. Just be like, there's no way that we are going to allow you to harm one hair on one head of an Israeli.
They're essentially attacking Israeli citizens on Israeli soil.
And I told this to an important Israeli Knesset member.
Yes.
I said to him, you guys have to stand up for even the
tiniest guy.
The tiniest guy. And he's like, no, you don't understand. It'll cost billions.
Right, it'll be billions of dollars. It's like, what?
I want to tell you, I know this Knesset member and I like him. And I just like, I got to tell you, first thing, his respect in my eyes fell a lot in that moment. I was just like,
right. Not a big brain guy, a small brain guy.
No, he's a plenty big brain guy.
Not on this. He's a Rosh Katan.
No, it's cowardice. It has nothing to do with a big or small brain. It's something to do with a completely different faculty. And the worst part about it is this is what makes me so crazy about it, which is that you can actually gain the respect of America, of the world. You stand up against this, the Biden administration.
They'll come out looking so foolish. And all of
all the American congressmen will stand up, including Democrats.
Right, and be like, you can't do this.
You can't do this. We're against this.
Right,
and
now we're sanctioning like tiny people. Incidentally, I just want to add a little micro detail here. The United States of America, considered the country which is the leader of the world, is like, we're so serious about security and we have analyzed everything to the max. We have determined that these people are enemies of the United States because they, whatever, we're making it up, but they did this thing. They sanctioned yesterday a person. His name is Aviad Sarid. Okay? He's a resident of Revava in Samaria. He finds out about this. He goes, what? Why? He's a Miluim soldier. Turns out he turns to like authorities to try to figure out what just happened to him, because now he can't buy milk and bread for his family because of the United States decided that it tells Israel how to operate with its own citizens. It turns out that actually the United States meant to sanction a guy named Shlomo Sarid. They sanctioned the wrong guy. The United States couldn't figure out that this kike is different than that kike. They couldn't discern between them because they have whatever, just slap a sanction on. I'm sure it's that guy. That guy. Sanction that guy. It's like the low level bullying without any sophistication, without any exactitude. Like, let's not even talk about the fact that they're sanctioning us. Let's put that aside. Some dude just found himself with no money because the United States couldn't even figure out which jid that it's supposed to, put its the weight of the United States against. So they fixed it, right? Now they sanctioned the right person. And these are all from this organization called Savteisha, which is an organization that's basically considered heroic in Israel. An organization of people that has been almost entirely peacefully protesting and blocking traffic, which, by the way, the anti-Netanyahu...
No. Blocking traffic for what?
Of aid to Gaza, which we have seen with videos.
Wait.
Watch.
So this group, you're not explaining to people. This group of people want to stop the aid being moved to Gaza, which ends up in the hands of the Hamas. Which ends up,
as I was going to say, that if you can watch videos and see that the aid is taken over by Hamas and is used by them, in the last round of negotiations for hostages, which I personally am against, but let's say I'm for. In the last round, the Israeli negotiating team was like, we're having a hard time negotiating because we have no leverage. You can look it up in the news. I didn't make it up. I read it in the newspaper. They said, we have no leverage. Why do they have no leverage? Because they've given them everything. Right. What are they going to do? Ungive it to them?
Yeah, including prisoners. Right. Including released prisoners.
So we have these people in Savteisha, and they're like the person who's been now sanctioned. Her name is Ben Chaim. Her last name is Ben Chaim Reut, I think it is. Reut Ben Chaim. And she says, she's like, everything we've been doing has been legal. This is democratic. This is democratic process. This sanction affects her. She has 8 children. But it affects the fundamental democracy of Israel, the fundamental sovereignty here. And she's like, you have to stand up for me and my rights here, my legal and judicial rights, because this is at the core of a functioning state. So it's a horrible shanda, as they say in English.
I have a problem with the Biden administration doing such a horrible thing, but I have a much bigger problem with Israel succumbing to them.
Right. I wouldn't expect anything from anyone else.
It's a
outside
bully
of
tactic.
Us. But we literally established
this
this state after the Holocaust because we couldn't trust anybody. And now we find ourselves, the Jewish people in the land of Israel, find ourselves in a situation in which our leadership cannot extract itself from the thumb of the world, and we are operating now based on the opinions of people who are not us. And it's terribly disappointing. It's terribly frustrating.
It really is, and it's chnuniut. Okay, Malka, I want to thank you so much. And before you go, I want to give you a blessing for Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.
Also, I wanted to thank you for helping me prepare this week for my debate on the Piers Morgan show.
Yes. I
was on with Piers Morgan and with Jonathan Kornikus. And with a guy named Konrikus.
Yeah.
And then I was also with Gidon Levy.
Yes.
A Hamas spokesman with a Hebrew accent. That's my new language for him. And a guy named Jonathan Mate.
Aaron
Mate. Matty.
Gabor's son.
Yeah. This guy.
Right. That is a guy who has no love for Israel.
Wow.
Yeah.
What this guy's supposed to be coming out of like a place of like his father is like a teacher of how not to pass trauma. This kid looks like he's got some serious trauma in him. So like I think his father passed unbelievable trauma to him. So here is the full debate, the full discussion on Piers Morgan about the issues of Jewish rights in Judea and Samaria, the Hannibal protocol, directive. and all the stuff that we dealt with on that show. I hope you're going to enjoy it. Here we go.
You're whitewashing mass murder, which is the whole point of suppressing the truth about October 7th.
Oh, and I guess you are the bearer of truth? A Hamas apologist, you will tell viewers around the world about truth?
Can you stop talking now? I didn't interrupt you.
After Yaniv Kubovich published his scoop, I sent him a text message asking, so Roger Waters was right. And he answered me, no, don't go so far. Israel, for 100 years, is denying the catastrophes of the Palestinian people. Not everyone who criticizes Israel is a BDS supporter or an anti-Semite or a marginal propagandist. No, there are many people of conscience who cannot see the scenes from Gaza, the scenes that we don't see in Israel.
Thousands of anti-war protesters blocked highways at the weekend as they demanded an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and the urgent resignation of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But these weren't radical students on an American campus, nor anti-Semites who believe Israel has no right to exist. They were Israelis protesting in Israel. And now, exactly 9 months into what is starting to feel ominously like a forever war, they represent the views of an increasing and global majority. Hamas has not yet been defeated. Scores of hostages remain in their captivity. Israel could face war on a second front as Hezbollah intensifies its attacks from Lebanon. So when will enough be enough? To debate this, I'm joined by Jonathan Gomrikas. He's a former IDF lieutenant colonel and international spokesman. Rabbi Yishai Fleisher, a former advisor to Itamar Ben-Gvir. The Israeli journalist and author Gideon Levy. And by Grey Zone reporter Aaron Matze. Well, welcome to all of you. Let me start with you, if I may, Jonathan Gomrikas. And it's to do with something that's been reported by the Haaretz newspaper, that the IDF, and I'm assuming you would have knowledge of this if it's true, ordered the Hannibal Directive on October the 7th to prevent Hamas taking soldiers captive. And this is something known as the Hannibal Directive, procedure or protocol, an Israeli military policy that stipulates the use of maximum force in the event of a soldier being kidnapped, the premise being that it's better to kill your own than let them be abducted and taken across the border into Gaza. Is that true?
Yes, hi, Piers. That report was written by the military correspondent of Haaretz, Yaniv Kubovich, and cited mostly by BDS supporters and Hamas supporters and others who have a very vested interest in minimizing the damage done and documented, the carnage done by Hamas murderers on October the 7th, and trying to put the blame of the 1,200 victims in Israel on the IDF, perversely, and not on Hamas. And the bigger picture here is that it may have happened. I have heard reports about it, and I think that in general, reports written by Yaniv Kubovich are credible. He's a serious journalist, and I take it with a lot of respect, and it needs to be looked into. And at face value, I wouldn't immediately rule it out, because as you know very well, and you have reported about it as well, October 7 was the most chaotic day in Israeli history. There was absolute mayhem on the ground. Israeli defense forces were scrambling to get down south to stem the tide of Hamas death squads and Palestinian civilians who were flowing into Israel to murder, to burn, to rape, to execute, to torch buildings, and to abduct Israelis. And it makes sense that someone at military headquarters would have made such, or would have given such an order. And I know that now the IDF is on the coming Thursday, and probably after that as well, we're finally going to see the first official and publicly available after-action reviews of the IDF into the events, the horrible events of October the 7th, the massacre and the killing of Israeli civilians and the abduction of Israeli civilians. And I think we will have to wait until then to understand and to have a better picture. But very much happened on that day. It was, I think, the most challenging military situation Israel has ever faced. And I think that extreme measures were taken because there were extreme circumstances.
Okay, but to be clear, are you familiar with the Hannibal Directive then? Is this something everyone is aware of in the IDF?
I am.
And what is your understanding of what it actually means?
Yeah, so Israel, the fact that now, sadly, on the 7th of October, 252 Israelis and foreigners were abducted by Hamas into Gaza is sadly not the first time that any of our enemies try to abduct Israeli soldiers or civilians. This is something that Palestinian and other Iran-affiliated terrorist organizations have been doing for tens of years. And the protocol or this order is something that used to be in place in the IDF, which was designed to prevent such a catastrophe from happening, that an Israeli soldier or civilian is taken by terrorists into enemy territory. And the order isn't, as you said, to use maximum force. It is to use force that even may endanger the Israelis who are being abducted. It is not about killing Israelis. It's not about deliberately doing that. It's about using force that may even endanger Israeli civilians. And at this stage, I don't have confirmed reports from the IDF that say that this is actually what happened on the ground. But based on the reporting of Yaniv Kubovich, I think that's a trustworthy source, and it makes sense that that may have happened.
I mean, the reason I think it's so significant is that many people have been challenging the number of those who died that day and were wounded, challenging the pretext that they were all killed or wounded by Hamas, and that actually as a number, and no one's put an exact number to this, but a number of people on the Israeli side who died that day and were wounded were actually killed or wounded by Israeli fire. And so the significance of this development about the Hannibal Directive, and it seems from what you're saying that you think it's highly likely it was deployed, is that it may be a number of Israelis were killed that way.
Yeah, Piers, it may be true, and it may have been in the chaotic situation on October the 7th when Palestinian death squads were roaming around southern Israel as they were finished raping and burning and pillaging. And as Palestinians were coming in, it may have happened that that order was given. But let's not go astray from what really happened on that day. The overwhelming, vast majority of Israelis, civilian and military, were executed in cold blood by Hamas murderers. And no BDS journalists and no self-appointed Israel experts or self-hating Jews that we might hear from afterwards will ever be able to convince anybody that this wasn't Hamas's doing and that a substantial amount of Israelis were killed by friendly fire and not by Hamas death squads. There is overwhelming evidence, visual evidence to the fact that this is Hamas's doing.
I understand. I'm going to go to Aaron Martin next, but just to be clear, Jonathan, I mean, the clear reality of what you've said is that if this directive was given, it must be very difficult to work out exactly how many people were killed and wounded by Israeli forces or Hamas. I mean, how do you know if a directive is given to open fire without constraints in order to prevent abduction? How do you know?
Well, that is something that they'll have to look into. And, it took Israel, with the world's most advanced after-action review and genetic forensic detailing with dentists, etc., and sifting through remains of charred bodies. It took Israel more than 3 months to actually establish the amount of Israelis killed. And up until just a few weeks ago, we were still getting reports of Israelis who were now confirmed dead and actually not taken hostage. That is the magnitude of the tremendous job here of understanding what happened on October the 7th. And of course, BDSers, Hamas apologists, Israel haters, and other Iranian propagandists, they will go and they will pounce this with great joy, as if to say, oh no, this wasn't a Hamas attack, this was Israel's doing, and Israelis killed themselves. I think that is utter nonsense. Utter nonsense, because this was a rampage by Hamas terrorists.
That is inarguable. The question is exactly who was killed by who. Aaron Marte, you've been listening to this. You've actually been reporting about this Hannibal Directive, I believe, for quite some time. Hearing Jonathan Conricus, who was a former IDF international spokesman and obviously was in the IDF, hearing him concede that this was highly likely to have happened. What is your reading of this?
It did happen. That's been known for a very long time from Israeli military sources and witnesses who reported seeing Israeli forces fire on them on October 7th. The difference is that now, finally, an Israeli newspaper, Haaretz, has acknowledged this, and more Israeli military sources have come forward. The reporting from Haaretz says, according to one source, that the order was to turn the south of Israel, that frontier with Gaza, into a killing zone, which is exactly what happened. It underscores that Israel has no concern for civilian life, not just inside Gaza, but also its own people, because it did not want to have Hamas take captives that could be used for negotiations to free Palestinian hostages. And that's been lost here. There are thousands of Palestinian hostages in Israeli dungeons. And a major goal of Hamas here was to take captives and use them as leverage to free Palestinians who have been in Israeli dungeons for years and years and years. And excuse me, I didn't interrupt you. I did not interrupt you. I did not interrupt you, despite your many falsehoods.
No, but what you're saying
now,
is
the
disgusting.
Excuse me.
You're
I didn't interrupt you.
Hamas's murder.
And you're whitewashing mass murder, which is the whole point of suppressing the truth about October 7th since it happened. We have not heard.
Oh, and I guess you are the bearer of truth, a Hamas apologist. You will tell viewers around the world about truth. A propagandist for Hamas, someone who spreads falsehoods and lies about Hamas, and apologizes for them and tries to whitewash.
Can you stop talking now? I didn't interrupt you. You're a propagandist for the Israeli military, which is a mass murdering entity. And the whole point of this October 7th propaganda and burying the truth that Israel killed its own people was to manufacture support.
Have you ever been in Israel, Aaron?
Yes,
have you ever been in Israel? Lately, have you seen it?
Yes, I've lived in Israel. Yes, I've lived in Israel.
Have you been in the kibbutzim after October the 7th, Aaron? Have you been here? Have you seen the families? Have you met them?
Can you stop deflecting?
Have you met the survivors? Have you met the hostage survivors?
Can you stop deflecting and interrupting?
No, because
I understand why you want to change the subject.
As if you have any authority on the matter.
Okay, I speak as someone who's
concerned with facts. You speak as if you know anything. You speak as if you know Israeli civilians, as if you know what Hamas did on October the 7th.
I understand your job as a propagandist.
You haven't been here. You haven't watched Israeli civilians murdered by Hamas.
I understand you're doing your job, but I'm asking you to shut up now because I didn't interrupt you. You're a propagandist for mass murder, which is why you're trying to shut me up.
Still just a
in October.
Excuse me.
Stop talking. I didn't interrupt you. I let you spew on for minutes. I did not interrupt you. Now, the reason why you went and interrupt me is because I'm acknowledging the facts, which is that Israel did kill its own people on October 7th and hid that truth to manufacture support for its own mass murder campaign inside of Gaza, which has killed tens of thousands of people. That's the atrocity unfolding before our eyes right now.
Aaron, let me jump in here because, Aaron, let me ask you. I mean, it is quite clear from their own admission through the way they were live streaming a lot of the barbaric acts they were committing that Hamas murdered many, many, many people that day. You presumably accept that.
There certainly were atrocities on October 7th. Yes.
Right. I mean, how many people do you believe Hamas killed and wounded?
Well, the point is there should have been an independent investigation of this from the start, which Israel has
I'm sure we will.
Because,
I'm just asking
logically,
you.
Excuse me.
You're a journalist. You'll have seen all the same stuff as me, right? You'll have seen Hamas terrorists openly boasting about the horrors they were committing. It seems to me that it is indisputable that the vast majority of people who were killed that day were killed by Hamas. Now, what is significant to me is the revelation that this Hannibal directive was issued means that there was clearly some people on the Israeli side who were killed by Israeli forces as part of this open fire without constraints, even if it imperils the lives of Israelis. I don't think we know yet what the split is in terms of numbers, but I think to try and pretend, I mean, you accuse Jonathan Conricus of deflecting, but to try and pretend that the vast majority of people who were killed and wounded that day were not killed and wounded by Hamas would also be a deflection of the truth, wouldn't it?
It would be a deflection of the truth to insist without evidence that the vast majority of people were killed by Hamas. We don't know because there has not been a credible independent investigation, which Israel obviously wants to stop. Now, think of it logically here. Certainly, yes, Palestinian militants committed atrocities on October 7th. But think of it logically. If now you have confirmation from an Israeli newspaper and Israeli military sources that a directive was issued to turn that area into a killing zone, And to achieve that goal of preventing anyone from
isn't
crossing
what
back
was
into
said.
Gaza. Excuse
That
me.
isn't what was
That's
said.
exactly what Haaretz reported. I didn't interrupt you. I'm going to finish my sentence.
No, that
If
isn't
that
what
direct,
was
excuse
said.
me,
It
if that
wasn't a
directive
killing
is,
zone.
that's
No.
exactly what it says.
No.
It says in Haaretz. Excuse me. That's what it says. I'll post it online afterwards.
Well, the
People can check
fact
for
that it
themselves.
says so in Haaretz
Okay, excuse
doesn't
me.
make it true. And if you're citing a
that's what it
source,
is.
please be specific. And it's a
Yeah,
matter
I
of
did.
real
I
consequence.
did,
To
and you're
say
lying
that
about my
the
source.
directive
The
was to
Israeli-
turn it
I'm
into a
quoting an
killing
Israeli
zone
military source.
isn't correct.
All right, well, hang on.
Quoting an
Okay, hang
Israeli
on, hang
military
on.
source.
Hang on, please.
He's interrupting about.
When
Let
you
me finish
talk
my
over each
sentence.
other, it's very hard to keep up with it. Let me bring in
Yeah,
Gideon.
well, I'm not
Let me
talking
bring
over
in
him. He's
Gideon
talking
because
over me.
Gideon
No,
actually.
I'm going to finish my sentence. I'm going to
Well, finish your sentence, and I'm going to go to Gideon because he actually has word for Haaretz.
If one of the most sophisticated militaries in the world is employing a directive to turn the area into a killing zone and using its weapons of war, including Apache helicopters, then it's very plausible to assume that, yes, a large number of people were killed by Israel's own forces.
All right, Gideon Levy, I mean, Haaretz has written this thing, and it's gone around the world like wildfire, precisely for the reasons we're seeing in this debate, which is that it does, of course, now raise obvious questions of how many people were killed by who on that horrible, infamous day. What is your understanding? What is your... You've seen what this report says. What is your understanding?
After Yaniv Kubovich published his scoop, I SMS'd him. I sent him a text message asking, so Roger Waters was right. And he answered me, no, don't go so far. I've been to the south of Israel 48 hours after the 7th, on the 9th, and I saw a slaughterhouse. I have no idea how many of them were killed by Hamas and how many of them were killed by our own soldiers. But let's remember one thing. Whatever happened there, and terrible things happened there, and I am the first one to object any denial, because denial doesn't lead us to anywhere. But whatever happened there does not justify by any mean what Israel is doing in the last 9 months. And that's the main point. Was it partly by Hamas and partly by Israeli soldiers, or was it only by Hamas? Nothing can explain or justify slaughtering 38,000 people, most of them innocent people, most of them women and children. And I want to tell Jonathan, or Jonathan as you call him, not everyone who criticizes Israel is a BDS supporter or an anti-Semite or a marginal propagandist. No. There are many people of conscience who cannot see the scenes from Gaza, the scenes that we don't see in Israel. There are many people of conscience who blame Israel, and rightly so. And there are few Israelis who cannot see it and are ashamed for being Israelis when those things are happening. You don't need to label them as anti-Semites. They are people of conscience.
I wasn't labeling them. I was referring to our panelist. I wasn't
Sure you
labeling
did.
a lot of other people.
Sure
I was
you did.
referring to our panelist because I know he was up next,
all
and
you
I've
can do
seen
is
his
call
Twitter
people
feed.
names.
I've
Yes,
seen
as
your
an
Twitter
apologist
feed.
from Azure.
It's just flowing with
I'd
joy
like to bring in the only
Yes.
panelist who's not so far spoken, Rabbi Fleisher. Your thoughts about this?
First thing is, I want you to know that I served in Lebanon in 95 and 96 and in the Second Lebanon War as a combat soldier in the paratroopers, Israeli paratroopers. Yes, we had the Hannibal protocol that could take into effect because we knew what would happen if our people would be taken hostage. They would not only be used as a card, they would also be tortured and abused and raped and who knows what else. And we just know the incredible pain that would be inflicted on our people. And so our military has a protocol to stop that at all costs. It's one of the worst things that we can allow to happen is the taking of Israeli hostages. That's what's exactly what has happened. In fact, the Israeli army didn't do a good enough job at getting the bad guys on October the 7th. Had they done a better job and smashed the bad guys and really done a better job at smashing them before they ever came, we'd be in much better shape. So, we have continued to fight this war to rescue our hostages, to bring liberty and freedom to this region. I mean, I agree with everything that Jonathan says, but the other two panelists, for God's sakes, they, I can't disagree with the characterization that they are Hamas apologists. They literally are apologizing for Hamas on this program. At the end, Hamas is not a machine of rights. It's a machine of suppression. And Hezbollah is a machine of suppression, and Iran is a machine of suppression. Our job is to liberate the people of Gaza from the yoke of Hamas,
Rabbi Fleischer,
and
one
to
of the
liberate
problems,
this region from the jihad.
Rabbi, one of the problems, Rabbi Fleischer, is that Israel continues to refuse to let independent international journalists anywhere near Gaza. And as long as that continues, there is the ongoing. There's the ongoing. Well, it's true. I know most of my journalist friends who are war correspondents cannot get in there, and this remains this secrecy which Israel is insisting on having about the warfare it's conducting. I don't think helps Israel, because what it does is it leads to a lot of conspiracy theories raging, a lot of stuff that may or may not be true getting out there and being fueled on social media. But, I've, for 9 months or so, been having debates where a lot of people on the Palestinian side have said to me that on that day, October, on that infamous day, that many Israelis were killed actually by Israeli forces. And I have to say, I was very surprised when I read this report to see that actually there was a genuine directive issued by Israeli forces to do what appears to have happened. Now, I don't think that diminishes the horrors of what Hamas perpetrated, but it certainly lends succor to those on the pro-Palestinian side who try to bring some balance to this, that look, unless you let journalists in to do their jobs, then when a report like this comes out, and journalists like Aaron and others have been reporting this for a long time, but had it denied, it is going to lend support to people who think the Israelis have something to hide. And so my question for you, Rabbi Fleischer, would be, why doesn't Israel let the journalists in? Let them go and do their jobs.
Pierce, Holocaust denial is a famous form of anti-Semitism. And
but that's
right
not my
now
question.
we have...
That's not my question.
Hold on. I'll get to it.
I've not heard anyone denying the Holocaust on this conversation.
Well, I'm saying that there is a type of action out there, a type of anti-Semitism that is classic, that comes in the form of denial of atrocities, and we're having the same thing right now. Now, you want reporters to go in. It's a war zone. It's a war zone. Reporters slow down the fighting, and we're trying to fight back.
There are reporters who go into every war zone in the world. I don't think it's down to Israel to decide whether it's dangerous or not for war correspondents.
I think Jonathan is probably more, he's the person to go to with regard
to... Well, okay, but let me ask Jonathan. I mean, this is the problem, I know top journalists who are incredibly frustrated.
You're absolutely right.
Jonathan, just 1 second. Look at the two journalists that we have. They use this, they're so-called journalists, they use this in order to deny the whole October 7th. They deny the whole cause and effect.
Well, actually, to be fair, I'm sorry.
They turn the whole thing upside down.
I haven't heard either of them.
Yes, it's so clear.
I haven't heard either of them deny that Hamas committed atrocities that day.
They want to turn it on its head. They want to make Israel the bad guy. They want to blame
the
victim.
If Israel,
okay,
but
they're denying what happened,
but I've had
turning
many,
it on its head. It's
right,
simple.
but I've had many people on the pro-Israeli side for many months denying that Israeli forces killed their own. And now I'm hearing that actually it's highly likely...
It's impossible to deny that. That's called the fog of war. Every war's got that. Friendly fire is one of the biggest problems in war.
There's a difference between a fog of war and a deliberate Israeli policy of this Hannibal directive, where you will open fire without constraints, even if it endangers lives of Israelis. There is a difference between the two things. Let me bring in Jonathan again. Jonathan, on this issue of journalists, why don't you let them in? I mean, surely it would be now in Israel's interest to make this more open.
Piers, you're right, and I agree with you. And I've said this to the IDF behind closed doors. I've said, allow international journalists in. The coverage coming out of Gaza is challenging and negative anyhow. And I think that it would be better, and I thought months ago, and I agree with you, that it would be better to have them inside.
Let him finish, Aaron. You didn't like him interrupting you. Let him finish.
It would be better to have international journalists inside. And actually, one of the issues with media coverage in Gaza is that it relies on Palestinian stringers who are all either controlled by Hamas or at least intimidated by Hamas. And there should be international
that's what you get. That's what you get. That's what Israel gets.
That's what you get when there's a Hamas rule.
I have to say, as a journalist, that Israel has brought that on itself because if you only allow
And I
people
agree with you,
inside
Piers.
Palestine to report on this, then you're going to get clearly probably not the most impartial coverage by definition. So the best way
I
Israel
agree
can
with you,
make it more
Piers.
partial
I agree.
coverage is to let the journalists in. Let me bring in Aaron again.
I agree with you, Piers.
Let me bring in Aaron again. I mean, Aaron.
I agree, Piers.
Okay, well, that's good. We should reach points of agreement on some of these things. Aaron Marty, do you see at the end of this, and look, I just hope and pray this ends soon, but there seems to be no end in sight. But given that there's increasing protest now from within Israel trying to bring this to an end, what happens after this war? And let's put aside for a moment the second front of Hezbollah and what may be happening there. Let's focus entirely on what happens in Gaza after this. Do you think there can be any role for anybody left from Hamas to govern or part govern Gaza going forward?
That's not up to me. That's up
No,
to
but
the
what's
people
your
of
opinion?
Gaza. Well, that's not up to
Certainly
me.
it's not up to you.
Well, I'm not saying it's up to
It's
you.
up to the people of Gaza.
It's obviously not
And
up
the
to you, but what is
excuse
your
me.
opinion?
Let me finish my sentence. The point is, the people of Gaza have been denied their right to life, not just since October 7th, but for
By the
decades now.
Hamas.
Living under the
By
longest
Hamas.
running military occupation in the world that has denied Palestinians their basic
No, I
rights.
understand that. I understand that.
So it's up to them to decide, and they have the right to live in freedom. That's the fundamental problem here. Your previous guest spoke about how we want to bring freedom and liberty to Gaza. No, Israel doesn't. Israel is imposing the longest running military occupation in the world. And to enforce that now, it's destroying Gaza.
But why are you prepared? Okay, but why are you prepared, Aaron? Aaron, let me ask you.
It's not up to me
Why
to
are you?
decide.
Yeah, but you say it's not up to you to comment on Hamas. But you're very happy to comment on Israel's government, and there's an inconsistency there. If you're prepared
No,
to
it's
speak
not.
on
These are
behalf
not-
of Israel and criticize the Israeli government, why are you not prepared to criticize Hamas, who are the governing party over in Gaza?
I'm very well prepared to criticize Hamas. My friends in Gaza are not big fans of Hamas, but my point is it's up to them. And there's no parity here. We're not
I'm
talking about
asking
two
you for
equal
your
sides.
opinion.
We're not okay. I'm telling you my opinion. I'm telling it to you. We're not talking about two equal sides. We're talking about an Israeli regime.
I'm not saying we are.
That is running the longest
I'm simply
running
saying,
military occupation in the world.
Do you think, given what they perpetrated on October the 7th, can there be any possibility of any peace going forward, so long as any single person from Hamas remains in any kind of government position going forward?
By that standard, no Israeli has the right to govern because they've been perpetrating not just atrocities.
But again,
on
you're
one day,
defecting.
but
You're doing the
atrocities
very thing
for
you
decades.
chose.
I'm not.
You're doing the very thing you accused
it's not up
Jonathan
to
of
me.
doing. I'm going to come to Israel's government. I'm going to come to the Israeli side. But right now, I'm asking you about Hamas, who took over in 2005 and who, by their actions on October the 7th, to me, made it absolutely crystal clear they are not able to govern that country anymore or govern Palestine anymore. And so my question, I think, is a legitimate one. As we come out of this going forward, there are some people who think that whoever's left from Hamas should be allowed to continue to have some kind of governmental role. I say that is for the birds, that you cannot have anyone from Hamas involved in any government in Gaza going forward. There are legitimate questions, by the way, about a number of people in the Israeli government. I don't think Netanyahu should stay. I don't think Ben-Gvir should stay. I don't think Smotrich should stay. But right now, I don't see any role for anyone from Hamas. Do you?
Okay, and I'm going to answer your question. It's up to Palestinians because they're the ones being occupied. Could I say that Joe Biden has no right to govern because he's fueling?
You have a
this
right
mass
to say
murder
that. Of course you
campaign?
do.
Well, it's not up to me. It's up to
You're
his
very
voters. And it's up
judgmental
to
of
people
Israel's
Gaza.
government, but you won't be judgmental
Yes, because
about...
they're a military occupier that have been
Right.
depriving freedom of
what's
Palestinians
Hamas,
for
much of
decades
Please
now.
tell us
And
more
now, let me
about you
let me
not
say one more
being
thing.
Hamas
Let me say one more thing.
propagandist.
It's like an
let me say one more
Iranian
thing.
puppet is okay.
Let me say one more
but
thing.
the
Let me say one more
Israeli
thing.
regime
Don't
is
talk
not
over
okay.
each other, please. It doesn't help.
There was some negative talk of Palestinian journalists in Gaza before. I want to correct that. These are the bravest journalists in the world, and that's why they've been slaughtered by the dozens by Israel. These people are putting their lives on the line to bring people the truth of what's happening to their people. They deserve to be praised.
I don't
not
disagree.
smeared.
By the way, just to be clear, I don't disagree with you, but I think it's absolutely obvious that there's human nature would dictate that if the only people reporting or allowed to report by Israel are people on the ground who are Palestinian, it is more likely than not, isn't it, that they are not all going to be completely impartial, and that's my main argument
Yes,
about getting
victims
my
of
main
mass
argument
murder
of letting
are
Israel.
gonna, yes, correct.
No, I understand,
Piers.
but I'm just saying
Victims of mass murder.
Yeah, I
and
understand.
siege are gonna
I
have a
understand.
bias.
Whatever the
Correct.
reasons, they
Yes.
are unlikely to be overly impartial as a group.
Yes,
and that's
when your
why-
home is being
that's
destroyed,
why-
your people are being killed.
And
yes,
by the way,
it's hard
I
to be
don't think many
impartial. I agree.
Israeli journalists would be impartial either. So I'm saying that international journalists who are neither Israeli or Palestinian should be allowed in so that they can offer genuinely impartial coverage. At the moment, they're not allowed
Yes,
in.
and along with journalists, let's also stop blocking food, fuel, medicine,
I do
water
not
to Gaza,
disagree with you.
as has been the
I
explicit
don't
order of
disagree
the
with you. Let me bring
genocidal
in.
Israeli
Let me
government.
bring in.
Blocking it from
Hang on.
Hamas.
Let me bring in Gideon Levy. You've been waiting patiently.
What a
I mean,
joke.
Gideon.
What a joke.
How does this war end?
There are two possibilities right now, and there is no third one. Either Gaza will continue to be controlled by Hamas, a weaker Hamas, maybe a more moderate one, I don't know, I'm not sure it's possible, or Gaza will turn into Somalia. There is no third option, unless Israel stays in Gaza forever. We have to realize that Israel totally failed in crashing Hamas. I could tell it from the first day because it was an impossible goal to achieve. And we are now 9 months later, and Hamas is the sovereign in Gaza, and we cannot do anything right now, and nobody will be able to do anything without the approval of Hamas. Do I like it? No, but that's a matter of fact. If Hamas will fall apart, we'll get a Somalia, and I'm not sure which one is better for the Palestinians, for the Israelis, or for the world. But Piers, let me just say one sentence about denial, because the rabbi from the settlement say that the deniers are anti-Semites. There are no bigger
the
deniers
Holocaust
than the
deniers are anti-Semitic.
Israelis.
It's true. That's what I said.
Just a second. Let me finish.
Please. Go ahead.
Israel, for 100 years, is denying the catastrophes of the Palestinian people. From the Nakba until what's going on now in Gaza, it's a long history of denying the suffer of the other people. What a chutzpah is it to come and complain about someone who denies what happens on the 7th of October when we never recognize the Nakba, the catastrophe, the nation catastrophe of the Palestinian people, the occupation, the apartheid, and now what's going on, the mass killing in Gaza. It's okay when Israel denies everything, because Israel is always the only victim. Israel is the only one who suffers, and dare you to think about anyone else who suffers around us.
Okay, let me bring in.
Piers?
I want to bring in the Rabbi Fleischer here on a particular point, which there's been.
Piers, but can I answer that, please? For a
You can
second?
answer that, then I'll ask you a question. But answer that first.
Thank
yeah.
you, sir. He challenged me directly, so I want to just
Okay.
answer that. He right at the end there, he said, "Can you think of any other people that have been, abused around here? Have you heard of the Kurds? Have you heard of the Copts? Have you heard of the Yazidis? You know what we have in common? We're all ethnic minorities. Happens to be that Israel and the Kurds are armed ethnic minorities around here. And therefore, when the majority and the jihadists come to try to destroy us, as they did in 48 and 56 and 67, 73, and all the terrorism since then we have pushed them back. We are an armed ethnic minority in this region trying to survive. We're a tiny little people. So yeah, we push back on the bad guys. And there are many examples of people around here who push back on the bad guys, some successfully, some less successfully. The Kurds, our Muslim allies, have successfully pushed back on the Iranian jihadists, the Turkish, the Iraqi, all the folks that hate them. And that's why we're allied. People like us, ethnic minorities in this region that are armed, survive because we're able to push back on the jihad. And the fact that you think that there's no other minorities that are like us is just laughable. We are a small people in a small land.
All right, you
and
made
we're
the
going to
point.
push back hard.
You made the
So
point.
yes,
Let me ask him this
They
question.
had the honesty to admit that
Hang
they
on,
said
please. I've got a
Weak
question
ones
for the.
and
I have a
the
question
others.
for the
Sorry to hear
rabbi.
you. Go ahead.
I have a question.
Thank you, sir.
And it's this:
Yes, sir.
why has there been a spike now in new settlements on the West Bank, including retroactively authorizing 3 outposts? How can that do anything but massively inflame the already extremely tense atmosphere around the West Bank? And how is this defensible?
It's not only is it defensible, it's the only way forward. The only way forward is for the Jewish people to live in their land, to push back on the Palestinian Authority and the Hamas and those entities, to assert sovereignty. So, hold on one second. I'm not American. I was born in Israel. My parents were Russian refuseniks. Read the freaking Wikipedia. For God's sakes, I served in the army here and I just came back to the reserves right now. Please do me a favor. Do me a favor. I was born in Haifa. I speak Hebrew and English. You are a Canadian from nowhere. You have nothing to do with anything.
You're a Russian.
All you know is discordia.
You're a Russian settler, not an American settler.
You're just
stealing Palestinian land.
You're nothing but a talking head on TV. You have nothing to do with this land. You have nothing to do with this place. Keep saying
correct.
I have
nothing to do with mass murder and apartheid.
Go back to Canada and your little books behind you. You have nothing to do with this region. You don't speak the languages of this region. You're not from here. You never served here. I spoke to Arabs
not from there
today.
You're
I
not
am
from there
here. I was
either.
born in Haifa, Israel. My parents fought to come to this
They're
land
from
the Russian Soviet regime. And you are just a Canadian sitting out there sniping with your little understandings of things. Go back and read another book.
We have a lot
and
more
be part of
common
something
ethnically
else.
than you do
Please
with anybody from that
do
land.
Do me a favor. I am
Eastern
an
European
ethnic
Jews.
Jewish person, which is a Judean from this land.
Listen,
we
I don't
have
want
the
you to
same
carry on.
DNA
Listen,
as the Arabs.
yes.
Almost the same
All right,
language,
fascinating though it is where you both come from.
You're the same
Hang on.
DNA as the okay.
Look, fascinating though it is. Can we get back to the question?
Rabbi
Fleisher, I want you to justify the expansion of the settlements.
Today at a well. At
How
a
do you,
spring
how do you
in Hebron,
justify
talking about the future? This guy, he's in Canada.
Rabbi
talking about
Fleisher,
Concordian stuff.
if you may,
yeah.
How do you justify
Arabs at a well at Hebron?
Hang on,
were you
please.
stealing
Can
the
I
well
talk,
or just
please?
Destroying it, which is what Israel does.
Right, please let it go.
Yes, sir.
Rabbi Fleischer, how do you justify the expansion of settlements at this particular time all over the West Bank?
I don't justify it. I laud it. I'm proud of it. I can't be prouder about this government. And finally, we are resettling our land, our small land that pushes back against jihadism. This is correct in terms of security. It's correct in terms of pushing back on jihad. It is also our legal land that we purchased, that we won in wars, that is our ancestral land. You dig in the dirt, and that's where our history
is. All right, let me ask the same question. Let me ask the same question.
Wait a minute, Piers, hold on. This is the important point. You asked about the future of Gaza. Future of Gaza is the same. Israel's going to govern Gaza. Israel's going to govern it first militarily, then it's going to resettle it. Decent Arabs who are post-jihad, anti-jihad, who are pro-Israel and want an upward mobility in life, they're going to become residents of this land. They're going to have a future, not under jihad, but under normalization. And the Jewish people are going to live in our tiny land, especially in Judea and Samaria, the so-called West Bank.
Okay, Jonathan.
In short, he's saying we can steal Palestinian land because God promised it to us.
It's not Palestinian land. It's our land. You just don't know your history.
I'm actually curious. I'm curious what Jonathan Conricus thinks of that. What you've just heard. Do you agree with him?
Well, I think that, I want to connect first of all, I think it's very interesting that we are 4 men. I think all of us probably born Jewish, if I read the Wikipedias right, and with quite a diversity of views on topic. 3 of us live here, 1 doesn't, but we have very strong views on this topic. And I think it's interesting, the day appears that you will have 4 Muslim guys, 2 of them speaking positively about Israel and 2 of them speaking on behalf of Palestinians, then I will know that we have made tremendous strides forward. Until then, it'll be a lot of infighting here. Regarding what you asked about the future of Gaza, and I want to connect with what Gideon said.
All right, please let him finish speaking.
And I want to connect with what Gideon said and Rabbi Fleischer. I do not agree with Gideon Levy about and I'm not so certain as if I have a crystal ball and I know what will happen in the future of Gaza. I do not think that the only scenarios are either Hamas or a Somalization of Gaza. I think that there is a chance, and it has to be nurtured, and it has to be fostered by diplomacy and international leadership and Israeli leadership, which at this time I do not see. And I lament the fact that I do not see it. But there is a third possibility, an option of Israel for a short period of time controlling the Gaza Strip, and then with international assistance through a regional Arab peacekeeping or rebuilding Gaza force, comes in and starts the long and tedious process of rebuilding Gaza, of de-radicalizing it, of freeing it from Hamas, which will take a generation to re-educate and re-establish something totally different in Gaza, with lots of hard work, with courage, with vision, with bravery from European leaders, American leaders, Arab leaders, and Israeli leaders. That is possible. I agree with Gideon that it is difficult and that the chances of things going even worse, Somalization, or perhaps even Hamas still oppressing 2-point-something million Palestinians in Gaza in a occupation and a reign of terror, that may happen. And if it does, that's an Israeli failure.
And what
that's
happens,
a global failure. And I really hope it doesn't happen.
Okay, and what happens if there's a new front to this war from Hezbollah, who've launched more than 200 rockets and attack drones into northern Israel in response to the killing of one of its commanders? This is getting very tense, isn't it, Jonathan? What happens if there's a second front of war with Hezbollah now developing?
So then we will all see and understand the magnitude of Iranian strategy against Israel. And I think that we would be very close to a regional war, and not only a war between Israel and another, the number one Iranian proxy, but something that could possibly engulf the entire region. And if people around the world are concerned about civilian suffering and casualties and the horrors of war that we see in southern Israel and in Gaza, where people are suffering, and I acknowledge that, Gideon, and I see and understand the suffering, and I do not belittle it, but the fact that our suffering, Israeli suffering, matters more to me doesn't mean that I am obtuse to their suffering. But at the end of the day, if war erupts between Israel and Iran's most powerful proxy organization, we are talking about decimation and destruction by an order of magnitude much more severe than what we have seen with Hamas and Gaza and Israel. They are 5 times more powerful than what Hamas is. They have many more rockets with longer range, bigger warheads with better precision, many more people operatives, and they have better equipment. They are better trained and deadlier and more fierce and brutal than what Hamas ever was. And as a consequence, there will be casualties in Israel, and as a consequence, there will be tremendous casualties in Lebanon. And we all know how the show goes. We know that the show goes with terrorists attacking Israel, and then Israel defending itself and inflicting damage on the terrorists and those who hide and support them. Casualties ensue, and then Israel gets criticized for defending itself. I can already write the script of Aaron's Twitter feed. I can write the script of your little miserable Twitter feed.
Let me let Aaron Marte respond to that. Aaron Marte, your response.
So many falsehoods there. Hezbollah exists because Israel invaded Lebanon.
Please don't talk over each other.
Yes, I can write your script too. Hezbollah exists because Israel invaded Lebanon in 1982, killed tens of thousands of people. It's a resistance force. Hezbollah has said that its goals are very limited. It wants Israel to agree to a ceasefire.
Get your history straight from afar.
You
don't even know history because you don't know it. You don't live here. You never grew up here. You never were in a bomb shelter from a Hezbollah rocket.
Why it's Israelis that need to be re-educated and de-radicalized. Any Israeli who supports mass murder and apologizes for it.
Sure, you don't even know the history that you read in Wikipedia. Get your numbers straight, Aaron.
Israel invaded in 1982 and killed tens of, and that after then is when Hezbollah was formed. That's fact. Now, please, I'm going to finish this thought. If Israel wants genuine peace and security, it can agree to the entire international consensus, which everybody except for Israel and the U.S. supports. That's a contiguous Palestinian state, which for Palestinians is a major compromise. Only 22% of their historic homeland is what Palestinians, including Hamas, have previously accepted. A Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. Israel, since its founding, has been trying to destroy and crush Palestinian national identity. That's why Israel has had all these wars, starting in 1948, when by the time Arab armies invaded, you had Israel already expelling more than half of the Palestinian refugees that were created then. And you can play that playbook over and over and over. That's why Hezbollah exists, is to resist Israeli aggression. Hezbollah has said that it will stop its strikes on Israel if Israel simply agrees to a ceasefire. Even Israeli generals are now saying that they want a ceasefire. The main obstacle now is Netanyahu and his extremist coalition, which for its own political survival, in complete disregard for Palestinian civilian life, as they've made clear, and also their own captives, they're the ones wanting to continue this war because they're bent on surviving politically and also leaving Gaza in ruins, because their ultimate goal is, as these two radical extremist settler apologists have made clear, they want to control Gaza because they do not see Palestinians as equal human beings. And that is the fundamental problem.
All right,
here.
let me ask.
Let's de-radicalize Israeli apologists like these two, and then we can have peace.
Let's try and keep it non-ad hominem. It makes things so much more civilized. Let me bring in Gideon again. The hostage negotiations.
They called me a Hamas apologist. I'm returning the favor.
I think
also,
it doesn't.
It doesn't.
You know what? It doesn't.
They also invoked the Holocaust.
You know something.
I'm the son of the
You know
Holocaust
something. It
survivor.
doesn't do any of you. It doesn't do any of you any favors.
Proving it by every
Ad
word you
hominem
say.
attacks don't do anyone any favors. Let me bring in Gideon. Gideon, the hostage negotiations continue. Netanyahu has sent a team of negotiators to discuss the latest phase of these negotiations. Ultimately, there are still well over 100 Israeli hostages who are believed to be being still held by Hamas. There was a baby who was kidnapped. No one knows what's happened to that baby. Other young children were kidnapped. Do you believe every one of those hostages should be released immediately?
No doubt, but there is a price for it. It doesn't go like this. Look, I'm
How
not
can
an
there be a
advocate
price
neither
for
for
hostages?
Hamas. No.
I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious. How can there be a price
that's
on
interesting.
How can you kidnap a baby
I'll tell
and
you
then
how.
say there's a price to release that baby?
I'll tell you exactly. Israel holds thousands of Palestinians without trial. They are hostages.
Any
Why
babies?
does Israel keep them?
Are there any babies?
Why? Children. Israel killed enough babies. Let's not get into
Hamas
this
literally
comparison,
kidnapped
please.
a one-year-old
Let's
baby.
not get into this comparison. Yes,
But you said there's a price. I'm sorry,
17,000
hang on.
children were
You
killed.
said there's a price on the kidnapping
But-
of a one-year-old baby. How can that be? How can that be? That there is a price for the return of a kidnapped baby?
You cannot put this resolution because there is also a price for a baby who remained alone in the world with all his parents, brothers and sisters and grandparents were killed in front of his eyes. What about his fate? He doesn't interest you? You think really that we are the only victims here? You really think that the world can take attention only for one baby who was kidnapped, which is a horrible scene, and not see 17,000 children slaughtered,
I think there are.
killed,
No, I didn't say that. I think there are victims on both sides, but I am going to pick you up on what you said. When I hear someone like you, Gideon, when you say that in response to me saying a one-year-old baby was kidnapped has not been returned, you say there's a price to be paid. That fills me with horror. And I'm horrified by a lot of what's happening to Palestinian children. Horrified.
Yes.
But there should be no price on a kidnapped baby.
Pierce, this baby shouldn't have been kidnapped, and it's barbaric to kidnap him. They should have left him with his parents back, even if they went to a liberation operation or whatever they want to call it. They should have not touched this baby, and it's horrible. Don't get me there because there are no doubts about it. We are all human beings. But you ask about the hostages, not about one baby. And the hostages are the asset that the Palestinians have now. Like Israel, for example, is maintaining, robbing hundreds of bodies, if not thousands of bodies, claiming officially that this is for negotiations. So bodies are okay for negotiations, for bargaining, and hostages are not okay for bargaining. I wish everyone will be released. The Palestinian hostages and the Israeli hostages.
Okay, let me bring in.
Both deserve freedom.
Okay, let me bring in Rabbi Fleisher. We'll have to wrap it up after this. Rabbi Fleisher, I don't see how Netanyahu completes his mission. I do not think Hamas is going to be completely eradicated. What I do think is in the process of trying to achieve that goal, many, many more innocent Palestinians and some Hamas are going to get killed. But ultimately, Hamas will still exist at the end of this in some form. And the ideology which fueled Hamas will, in my estimation, have only been exacerbated by the events of the last 9 months, not eliminated. So I don't see how Israel comes out of this stronger. I think Israel comes out of this in a more perilous state. Why am I wrong to think that?
Well, you may not be wrong. You may be right that we come out a little bit weaker here because we have allowed our enemies to build up a military infrastructure in Gaza and in South Lebanon, and then to attack us through a very thought out plan. And they had a field day on October the 7th, and they had a field day on American campus. They've prepared for a long time. I also have my criticism of Prime Minister Netanyahu and the previous governments that they've allowed this terrorism and jihadism to flourish underneath our noses, and not only just the physical preparation for war, but the preparation for mental jihadism, right? The idea of jihadism. And that's, by the way, one of the things that my co-panelists on the, whatever you want to call it, the other side, always seem to fudge. The thing that they seem to hide is that the jihadists do not claim in Arabic and in their own lingo that this is a liberation movement for equal rights or to get out of occupation or apartheid. They never say any of that stuff. What they say is, we got to destroy Israel. And our boss, Iran, wants us to destroy Israel. In the meantime, they've taken places like Lebanon, destroyed it. It used to be a beautiful place. They've taken a place like Gaza, destroyed it, because the jihad is a self-destructive phenomenon as well. It destroys its own societies because it's filled with hate and rage, and it directs money instead of into hospitals and building and schools into war machines. Israel has made a mistake that Zionism. It has allowed. Israel has made a mistake. Yeah, Zionism. Okay. No, I'm not. Israel is a light in this region. Israel is a light of progress and liberty,
a mass murdering light,
and values. And okay, that's your skewed view. What can I do?
Okay, I'm going to have to leave it there.
I'll finish up. I'll finish up. My point. Thank you, Piers, and thank you for letting me be on the program again. I want to say that Israel does have a future because it's going to wake up through this. October 7th is an awakening process. We're not going to let the bad guys grow again beneath our noses. We're going to, as Jonathan said, we're going to go through a re-education process. We're going to get rid of jihadism in this region. We're going to hold on to our land, and we're going to allow new partners, if it's the UAE or Saudi Arabia or Morocco or others around the world who want nationalism, who want family values, who want the Bible, who want patriotism. A new axis is being formed of anti-jihad, pro-family, pro-values kind of access, and that access is going to clean the world from the jihadism that has taken.
I have to leave it there, but thank you to the panel. It was an excellent debate. It got heated at times, but it's bound to. But I do think when we resist the temptation to go ad hominem, we all learn a lot more, and I thank you for joining me.
All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed my discussion there on Piers Morgan. It was good stuff, definitely good stuff. And I want to thank all the folks that make the show possible. First thing, it's Yocheved Seidman, Moshe Herman, Ben Bresky, Tabitha, and David on the social media front. Thank you very much. And I want to bless the folks that help us make this show happen. And not just the show, but all of our messages going out to the world through YishaiFleisher.com /donate, and also at buymeacoffee.com /Yishai. Makes a humongous difference, your support. I appreciate all the folks that have been coming out strong and helping me out and helping us do our thing, helping Israel out, hopefully helping God's message out. You know, I don't want to be so presumptuous as to say that I'm certain of it, that we're doing God's message, but but that's how I understand what our Torah is telling us and what this time is telling us as well. I want to thank some of the sponsors to the show. First thing, it's HebronFund.org. Great tours, great connections to the city of the forefathers and mothers, the mamas and the papas, and the tomb and the shrine of the Machpelah, the mamas and the papas buried there, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac, Rebecca, Jacob, and Leah. That's HebronFund.org. And the good folks at, that take you to the Temple Mount at highonthehar.com, highonthehar.com. They will bring you in holiness and in awesomeness to the Temple Mount. And thank you very much to news websites that I recommend, jewishpress.com and jns.org. And thanks to our other sponsors as well, including the good folks at prohibitionpickle.co.il for delicious yummies in kosherness and exactly when you need it most on Shabbos and in Kiddush. And the good folks at retrowatchguy.com. And they make great old watches come back to life. I love those guys, and I love their Instagram. Lots of fun. And the good folks at Kosher Cycle Tours, helping us cycle through this beautiful world. I just took a hiking tour in Judea, but I'm sure it's awesome and windier on a cycle, koshercycletours.com. So, you know what else I want to plug right now? I want to plug one more thing, and that is Chabad.org. Chabad.org has got just great ways to learn Torah. And if you go to their Parsha section, which is the Torah section, so they have something called, like I'm going right now to Chukat, which is this week's Torah portion, text-based learning. So they have something called Chukat in depth. the Kahat Chumash, Parshat Chukat, and then a Chukat Torah reading with Rashi. The one that says Kahat Chumash, Parshat Chukat, they have a free PDF download of this week's Torah portion. And I'm turning now to the nations. You know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the international Torah community that is part of what's going on in Israel. I have a new name for the international Torah community. I'm starting to announce this, which is Abrahamic. That's what we are. We are Abrahamic. Jews, pro-Bible Christians, pro-Bible Muslims, folks that want to come back to a more biblical, more Abrahamic way of doing things. Abrahamic is our new title. That's the way we're going to call ourselves. Abrahamic. Abrahamic means that I am a Gentile who wants to walk in the path of Abraham. I want to be part of the Abrahamic faith system. Abrahamic faith system. And there's nothing more organic than being Abrahamic. There's nothing more organic in this world where you're connected to God and you're connected to the earth below through following God's path and Torah the way Abraham did. So there's nothing more organic. And there's nothing in the end that's more messianic, but I mean the real messianic, not the fake messianic. That word has been hijacked by people who are not messianic at all. So because messianic means following in the ways of Abraham, following the Torah to a connection with God. So there's not, you know what? There's nothing more organic. There's nothing more in the end, the real messianic, than walking the path of Abrahamic. So that is my release. That's what we call the international Torah community. Our shorter version is we're Abrahamic. I want you to say today, I'm part of the Abrahamic faith system. And so, if you, back to Chabad.org, if you go to the Kahat Chumash, they have every week a great link. Look, I'm clicking through it right now. And then they have, it says, download the complete Parsha in PDF format. And they give it to you for free. It's unbelievable. It is just unbelievable. And it's so beautiful. They laid it out so beautifully, and you'll understand the real sense of the Torah portion. And this week's it's Chukat. Chukat has many of very, very moving, very important stories. So there's the story of the red heifer, and I've talked a lot about the red heifer being something that cleanses us out from the energy of death, right? And then, which is one of the most important aspects of the Jewish people, is that we're able to defeat death and connect to the eternity. Then there's Miriam's death. Miriam's, the prophetess's death. And then there's Aaron's death. And I've been lucky enough to visit the tomb of Aaron today in the country of Jordan. Beautiful sight, unbelievable sight. So that's Miriam's death and the aftermath, Aaron's death. And then there's the famous story of the striking of the rock. Actually comes beforehand, but the striking the rock, what is that really about? Well, it's about, I think, something kind of that's overlooked and kind of simple. The real meaning of the striking of the rock was that Moses was frustrated with the people because of a elapsed frustration, what's the word I'm looking for here, when it's all gathered up together, when it's, you know, a lot of stuff that gets packed into something and it aggregates. He had aggregated frustration. He had aggregated aggravation. Now, maybe that's the name of the show, Aggregated Aggravation. But the problem is he was taking it out on a new generation. You can't have aggregated aggregation on a new generation. Can't be doing that. And then God said, there's no, and the Midrash I read this says very clearly, which is, if your whole generation is not going to go to the land of Israel, are you going to go to the land of Israel, the captain of the ship? No, that can't be done. And so, and you still have, you're related to the previous generation. And this week's Torah portion is already the next generation, the generation that's going into the land of Israel. Now they need a new generation of education, not aggravated aggregation, but a new generation of education. And so that's what happens with Moses. And then Moses himself, when he hears the bad news, he goes and fights the king of Sichon and Og, and he destroys these great kings, and he takes their land. and he takes a step in the right direction. That's Moses. He shows leadership even after he's told that he's out. Amazing. Wow. In any case, this Torah portion is Chukat, and it's got one more thing, which is when the Canaanites fought the Jews and kidnapped one Jewish person. The Midrash tells us it's a Jewess. The Jewish people were like, let us at the Canaanites so that we could fight them and destroy them. We will not leave anything of them. We'll not even take their spoils. We'll just destroy them because they touched a hair on the head of a Jewish person. And that's exactly what God granted them the right to do. That's the way you got to treat your enemies that want to destroy you, not with kid gloves, not by feeding them. I really do hope that there's going to be an awakening here in Israel. Let us pray that October the 7th is a moment of awakening. Let us pray that October the 7th is a moment of awakening for the Jewish people, and that we just no longer sleep, and that we allow ourselves to wake up and allow ourselves to have a holy rage against the enemies of Israel, who murdered a couple this week. And holy rage to make this world a better place and a more beautiful place and a more partnery place with good people in this world. And of course, let's take that rage and also say, God, we want to be closer to you. Give us the strength, Hashem. Please give us strength to follow you and to walk in your path. Please give us a chance to be more Abrahamic today. I'm more Abrahamic every day, right? Abrahamic every day. I hope you folks connect to these messages. Let me know what you think. My email is yishai@yishaifleisher.com, and I send you blessings from the land of blessings. Indeed, the land of blessings. Bless us back, and you shall be blessed. That's what it means to be part of the story of Israel. God bless you folks, wherever you are. Lots of love, lots of blessings, and shalom. Shabbat shalom.